December 7, 1941, a Sunday morning just before 8 o'clock Hawaii time. The first wave of Japanese aircraft streaked across the sky over Pearl Harbor, their engines slicing through the calm Pacific dawn. Bombs fell on battleships moored in the harbor, torpedoes tore through decks, and explosions rocked the base with a ferocity that stunned even those who had trained for war. In that moment, the United States was thrust into World War II, and the Pacific Theater became a battleground where victory was far from guaranteed. What followed would test the nation's resolve, its military capabilities, and its capacity to recover from near catastrophe. The morning attack left more than 2,400 Americans dead and nearly 1,200 wounded, with battleships such as the USS Arizona obliterated and the USS Oklahoma capsized. Aircraft were destroyed on the ground, fuel depots were ablaze, and the Japanese had achieved a tactical success unprecedented in American history. Yet, even amidst the chaos, critical assets survived. The aircraft carriers, which would prove decisive in the months to come, were not in port, and vital fuel storage remained largely intact. This narrow margin between disaster and total annihilation would shape the trajectory of the early months of American involvement in World War II. For 2 years prior to Pearl Harbor, the United States had remained officially neutral in the global conflict. President Franklin D. Roosevelt had warned of the growing threat posed by Axis powers, yet the nation was constrained by isolationist sentiment, economic recovery from the Great Depression, and congressional restrictions on direct military engagement. The attack forced a sudden shift from cautious preparation to immediate action, leaving American military and political leaders scrambling to respond to a war that was now unavoidable. In the weeks following December 7, 1941, the Pacific Fleet underwent rapid reorganization. Damaged ships were assessed and repaired under extreme urgency, personnel were reassigned, and coastal defenses were reinforced. At the same time, the United States declared war on Japan on December 8, prompting Germany and Italy to reciprocate, effectively linking the Pacific and European theaters into a single global struggle. The strategic challenge was immediate. American forces were outnumbered in the Pacific, unprepared for the type of fast-moving, combined arms warfare the Japanese had perfected, and facing a determined enemy in control of much of Southeast Asia. The first months of American engagement were marked by setbacks. Japanese forces advanced across the Philippines, Malaya, and the Dutch East Indies, demonstrating a level of coordination and tactical innovation that left Allied commanders struggling to respond. The Battle of the Philippines, which began in December 1941 and continued into April 1942, resulted in the capture of tens of thousands of American and Filipino troops and the infamous Bataan Death March. These early defeats highlighted the fragile position of the United States at the start of World War II in the Pacific and underscored how close the nation had come to catastrophic failure. Despite these losses, recovery began with a combination of industrial capacity, strategic planning, and adaptation. American factories, untouched by enemy attacks, shifted to full wartime production, delivering aircraft, tanks, ships, and supplies at a pace that gradually outstripped Japanese capabilities. The establishment of new naval bases and logistical networks across the Pacific allowed for sustained operations, even across vast distances. This industrial and organizational resilience was central to America's ability to recover from the initial shock of Pearl Harbor and early defeats in World War II. One of the turning points in this recovery was the Battle of the Coral Sea in May 1942. This engagement, fought entirely by aircraft launched from carriers, halted the Japanese advance toward Australia and demonstrated that American naval power could contest Japanese dominance at sea. Though the battle was technically a draw, it provided a critical boost to morale and proved that the United States could adapt to the new form of carrier-based warfare that defined World War II in the Pacific. Another pivotal moment came at Midway in June 1942. American cryptographers had broken Japanese naval codes, providing Admiral Chester Nimitz with crucial intelligence about the timing and location of the attack. The resulting ambush sank 4 Japanese aircraft carriers and shifted the balance of power in the Pacific. Midway exemplified how intelligence, training, and rapid adaptation allowed the United States to recover from early setbacks and seize the initiative in World War II. The recovery was not limited to naval victories. Across the South Pacific, American forces launched campaigns to retake key islands, employing a strategy known as island hopping. By targeting strategically important islands and bypassing heavily fortified positions, U.S. forces were able to advance while minimizing casualties and gradually isolating Japanese strongholds. Each successful landing required careful coordination of ground troops, naval firepower, and air support, reflecting lessons learned from earlier defeats and the evolving nature of World War II. In addition to military adaptation, leadership played a central role in America's recovery. Figures like Admiral Nimitz, General Douglas MacArthur, and Admiral William Halsey brought experience, innovation, and resilience to the challenges they faced. Decisions made in the first months of the war, including prioritizing carrier-based operations, expanding training programs, and reinforcing supply chains, set the stage for the broader Allied offensive that would follow. The combination of competent leadership and industrial support allowed the United States to transform near disaster into a sustainable and increasingly effective war effort. The home front contributed significantly to this recovery. American citizens mobilized for total war, producing ships, planes, and vehicles at unprecedented rates, while women entered the workforce in factories and support roles. Rationing, bond drives, and civil defense programs created a unified national effort, demonstrating that recovery from the early disasters of World War II required not only military action, but broad societal engagement. The months following Midway saw continued American progress, though challenges remained severe. Japanese forces maintained strong defensive positions across the Pacific, employing complex terrain, entrenched fortifications, and determined soldiers. American forces encountered fierce resistance on Guadalcanal, marking the first prolonged offensive against the Japanese. Victory there, achieved at great cost, demonstrated that recovery was possible, but would require persistence, sacrifice, and continued adaptation to the demands of World War II. As 1943 progressed, the cumulative effects of American industrial power, strategic planning, and battlefield experience began to reshape the Pacific theater. The United States produced more aircraft than Japan could replace, built escort carriers to protect convoys, and trained thousands of new pilots and sailors. Logistic networks spanning thousands of miles ensured that forces in the field were supplied, equipped, and reinforced. These efforts stabilized the front lines and laid the groundwork for future offensives that would ultimately bring the United States from a position of near defeat to one of sustained advantage in World War II. Across the Atlantic, American recovery was mirrored in the buildup of forces for the European theater. Troop deployments, training programs, and joint operations with British forces prepared the United States for large-scale amphibious assaults that would define the later stages of World War II. Lessons learned from early failures in the Pacific informed planning for Normandy, North Africa, and Italy, emphasizing the interconnection of theaters and the importance of adaptability in a global conflict. The recovery from near defeat also revealed vulnerabilities that required correction. Early logistical missteps, communication failures, and underestimation of enemy capabilities highlighted the need for improved coordination, intelligence, and training. Military leaders instituted reforms across branches, incorporating lessons from losses and near disasters to create a more resilient fighting force. By addressing weaknesses proactively, the United States ensured that the initial shock of World War II would not define its overall contribution or limit its ability to achieve victory. Technological innovation complemented these strategic and organizational adjustments. Radar, sonar, improved communications, and more reliable aircraft engines enhanced operational effectiveness. New amphibious landing techniques, combined arms coordination, and refined naval tactics allowed American forces to engage the enemy with increasing confidence and success. Each technological advance represented a step in the process of turning a precarious beginning into a sustained advantage in World War II. The human dimension of recovery was equally important. Soldiers, sailors, and airmen who survived early defeats were retrained, reassigned, and redeployed, gaining experience that improved operational effectiveness. The psychological resilience of troops, coupled with leadership that adapted to changing conditions, ensured that morale remained sufficient to sustain prolonged campaigns. World War II demanded both mental and physical endurance, and the ability to recover from early losses became a defining characteristic of American forces. American victories in the Solomons, New Guinea, and the Central Pacific throughout 1943 demonstrated the success of these combined efforts. Each campaign further weakened Japanese control, restored strategic initiative to the United States, and reinforced the principle that recovery from early setbacks depended on coordination, industrial capacity, and flexible strategy. The lessons of these battles would inform operations across both the Pacific and European theaters, showing how the nation's early struggles shaped its eventual approach to World War II. Logistics remained a central challenge throughout this recovery period. Supplying forces across vast distances required ships, convoys, and infrastructure capable of supporting sustained operations. American ingenuity, including innovations in transport, repair, and supply chain management, allowed the United States to maintain pressure on the enemy even in remote locations. The ability to supply and reinforce troops efficiently was a decisive factor in transforming near defeat into strategic momentum in World War II. The engagement of American forces in combined operations with Allied partners further reinforced the recovery process. Joint campaigns in the Pacific involved Australian, New Zealand, and British units, requiring careful coordination of strategy, resources, and command. These multinational efforts reflected the interconnected nature of World War II and highlighted the importance of cooperation in overcoming early vulnerabilities. By late 1943, the pattern was clear. Initial setbacks had been absorbed, lessons had been learned, and American forces were capable of sustained offensive action. The recovery was not linear or effortless. Losses continued, mistakes were made, and the enemy remained dangerous. Yet the combination of industrial might, adaptive leadership, technological innovation, and societal mobilization had transformed the trajectory of the war in the Pacific and positioned the United States to assume a central role in the ultimate Allied victory. In the air, American bombers now projected power across vast distances, striking Japanese supply lines, fortifications, and industrial targets. Fighter escorts protected these missions, reducing losses and improving effectiveness. Naval forces, strengthened by new carriers and experienced crews, challenged Japanese movements, securing sea lanes and enabling amphibious operations that brought the fight closer to Japan itself. Each success was built upon the foundation of recovery from the catastrophic early months of World War II. The lessons learned during this period would carry forward into 1944 and beyond, influencing strategic decisions, operational planning, and tactical execution. American forces had demonstrated that near defeat did not equate to failure, and that recovery required a combination of resources, intelligence, training, and adaptability. These principles would guide campaigns across the Pacific and Europe, reinforcing the United States' emergence as a decisive power in World War II. The human cost of recovery was evident in every engagement. Casualties were high, and the intensity of combat tested the endurance of soldiers, sailors, and airmen. Medical services, evacuation procedures, and battlefield care improved as experience accumulated, but the reality of loss remained stark. The willingness of individuals to continue fighting, despite early setbacks, reflected the broader resilience of the United States as it turned a near catastrophe into sustained operational capability in World War II. The period following the attack on Pearl Harbor exemplifies the complexity of recovery in modern warfare. America faced the prospect of defeat, confronted immediate threats on multiple fronts, and suffered severe losses. Yet through industrial mobilization, strategic adaptation, technological innovation, and societal engagement, the United States transformed its position, regaining the initiative and laying the groundwork for future successes. The story of how America recovered from the brink of disaster is a testament to the interplay between human resilience, organizational capacity, and strategic vision in World War II. American efforts in the latter half of 1943 demonstrated that recovery was more than the restoration of lost territory or equipment. It was the creation of an operational framework capable of sustaining prolonged campaigns across vast theaters. The combined effect of training, experience, and resources allowed American forces to engage Japanese troops with increasing confidence, culminating in the liberation of key islands, the disruption of enemy supply networks, and the establishment of forward bases essential for subsequent operations in World War II. The process of recovery also reshaped American military doctrine. Early defeats highlighted the need for flexibility, inter-service coordination, and innovation in both strategy and tactics. Lessons from the Philippines, the Coral Sea, and Guadalcanal informed future amphibious operations, carrier deployments, and logistical planning. By learning from mistakes and adapting to enemy strengths, the United States demonstrated that recovery in World War II was not simply reactive, but an active process of transformation that strengthened its overall combat effectiveness. Naval engagements remained central to this recovery, as the control of sea lanes enabled the transport of troops, equipment, and supplies essential for sustained campaigns. American forces leveraged industrial output to replace losses quickly, ensuring that setbacks could be absorbed without halting operations. This ability to maintain momentum despite early defeats reflected a key strategic advantage in World War II, the capacity to convert industrial strength into battlefield success. The intertwining of domestic and military efforts became increasingly apparent. American workers in shipyards, aircraft factories, and munitions plants were integral to recovery, producing the tools of war that enabled the nation to regain initiative. Civic participation through bond drives, rationing, and volunteer efforts reinforced the connection between the home front and the front lines, demonstrating that recovery in World War II was a total national endeavor. As the United States solidified its position in the Pacific, the strategic implications of recovery became clear. Japanese defensive lines were progressively weakened, American forces gained experience and confidence, and the foundation for future operations, including the eventual push toward Japan, was established. This period of adaptation and resilience highlighted the dynamic nature of World War II, where even near-catastrophic setbacks could be transformed into opportunities for strategic advantage. The success of America's recovery in the Pacific was mirrored by its growing involvement in Europe, where lessons learned from early setbacks in one theater informed strategy in another. Troops trained in amphibious landings, combined arms coordination, and jungle or urban warfare were redeployed across multiple theaters, bringing experience that would prove invaluable for operations in North Africa, Italy, and later France. These operations reinforced the principle that recovery was not just about regaining lost ground, but about transforming the military into a force capable of sustained, global operations during World War II. In North Africa, American forces faced seasoned German and Italian units, testing their ability to implement hard-won lessons from the Pacific. The campaigns in Tunisia and Morocco demanded coordination between ground forces, air support, and naval logistics, and highlighted the importance of preparation and adaptability. Initial American mistakes were corrected through continuous training and strategic adjustments, reflecting the cumulative process of recovery that had begun after Pearl Harbor. The invasion of Italy in 1943 further illustrated America's ability to recover and project power. Harsh terrain, well-fortified enemy positions, and determined resistance required careful planning and integration of intelligence, artillery, and air support. Operations such as the landings at Salerno and Anzio tested the limits of logistics and command structures, while simultaneously building experience that would be critical for future operations in Western Europe. Each engagement demonstrated that recovery from early setbacks had produced a military increasingly capable of handling complex, multifaceted campaigns in World War II. American industrial and technological capacity continued to be decisive. New aircraft, including long-range bombers and fighter planes, provided critical support for both European and Pacific operations. Tank production accelerated, providing armored units capable of penetrating defensive lines and supporting infantry advances. Shipyards produced landing craft, carriers, and escort vessels at rates unmatched by the Axis powers. The scale and speed of production ensured that American forces could sustain offensive operations while continuing to learn from experience in the field. The human dimension of recovery remained central to success. Troops who had survived early losses carried with them lessons in resilience, improvisation, and cooperation. Training programs evolved rapidly to incorporate real-world experience, producing soldiers, sailors, and airmen who were not only technically skilled, but psychologically prepared for the challenges of World War II. Leaders at every level emphasized adaptability, initiative, and the ability to exploit weaknesses in enemy defenses, reinforcing the principle that recovery was as much about human capacity as it was about material resources. Intelligence continued to play a crucial role in America's resurgence. Code-breaking, aerial reconnaissance, and interrogation of prisoners provided critical insights into enemy plans and capabilities. Information gained through these methods allowed commanders to anticipate attacks, select targets with maximum effect, and allocate resources efficiently. This integration of intelligence with operational planning exemplified how recovery in World War II involved systematic learning and application, turning previous vulnerabilities into advantages on the battlefield. In the Pacific, island campaigns highlighted the incremental nature of recovery and progress. Operations at Tarawa, Kwajalein, Saipan, and Peleliu required extensive planning and coordination, reflecting lessons learned from Guadalcanal and other earlier engagements. Amphibious assaults were refined, with naval bombardments, pre-landing reconnaissance, and integrated air support reducing casualties and improving success rates. Each campaign demonstrated the cumulative effect of experience, organization, and industrial capacity on America's ability to recover from near disaster and maintain strategic momentum in World War II. American advances in the Pacific also relied heavily on innovation and adaptability. Engineers developed new landing craft, portable bridges, and demolition equipment to overcome difficult terrain. Air and naval coordination improved as pilots and sailors gained experience operating in contested environments. Logistics officers devised supply chains that allowed forces to operate far from established bases, maintaining momentum despite the challenges of long-distance operations. This combination of technological innovation, tactical adaptation, and logistical planning was central to sustaining recovery in a theater initially dominated by the enemy. Meanwhile, the European theater saw the fruits of American industrial and military recovery manifest in large-scale operations such as Operation Overlord. The Normandy invasion required coordination of massive numbers of troops, ships, aircraft, and supplies, representing a culmination of the lessons learned in earlier campaigns. The ability to organize and execute such a complex operation was directly linked to the recovery process that began after early setbacks, demonstrating how initial failures could produce institutional learning that ultimately enhanced combat effectiveness in World War II. Casualty management and medical care became integral to sustaining operational capability. Field hospitals, evacuation procedures, and improved surgical techniques ensured that wounded soldiers could return to service more quickly, maintaining troop strength despite high losses. This focus on preserving human capital reflected the understanding that recovery depended on both material and personnel resources, and that the lessons of early defeats were applied not only to tactics, but to the broader management of forces in World War II. American society remained fully engaged in supporting the war effort, providing the industrial output, food, and supplies necessary to maintain campaigns on multiple continents. Women's participation in factories, African American migration to industrial centers, and civilian volunteering ensured that the home front matched the intensity and scale of operations abroad. Recovery, therefore, was a national endeavor, linking every component of society to the larger goal of regaining initiative and achieving strategic success in World War II. As 1944 unfolded, the cumulative effect of these efforts became increasingly visible. Japanese positions in the Pacific weakened as island after island fell to American forces, while in Europe, German defensive lines faced increasingly coordinated and well-supplied Allied armies. Each victory was built upon the foundation of earlier recovery, illustrating how setbacks could be transformed into learning opportunities, and how resilience, organization, and industrial capacity could ultimately determine the trajectory of World War II. The psychological impact of recovery extended beyond military operations. Soldiers who had endured early defeats gained confidence from subsequent victories, while civilian populations in occupied territories drew hope from the increasing effectiveness of American forces. These morale effects were not incidental. They shaped behavior on both sides of the conflict, influencing the willingness of individuals and nations to resist or cooperate, and contributing to the overall momentum of World War II. Strategic planning increasingly emphasized coordination between theaters. American forces in the Pacific, Europe, and North Africa were not operating in isolation. Lessons, intelligence, and resources were shared across continents. This global perspective allowed the United States to allocate resources where they were most needed, prioritize objectives, and sustain long-term campaigns. Recovery was thus not just about regaining lost ground, but about integrating multiple components of military power to achieve strategic advantage in World War II.